Old Testament Bible Stories. In this video we have compiled all of our Old Testament Bible stories into one video, so feel free to use the timestamps on the screen to watch that particular section, or sit back and enjoy all of our Old Testament Bible stories. The Creation Story. In the beginning, God said, "Let there be light," and light appeared. God saw that the light was good. God separated the light from darkness. He called the light day, and the darkness night. On the second day, God made the earth and the sky. On the third day, God created the land and the seas. He also created plants and trees. On the fourth day, God created the sun, the moon, and the stars. On the fifth day, God created birds and sea creatures. On the sixth day, God created animals to fill the earth. God also created humans to enjoy and care for all that He had made. And so the heavens and the earth were complete in God's image. On the seventh day, God had finished His work, so He rested. God blessed the seventh day and made it holy. He was happy with all He had made. And this is the creation story from the Bible. Genesis 1, chapter 1. Thanks for watching. The story of Adam and Eve. God made a garden in Eden for Adam. It was beautiful. God did not want Adam to be alone, so He created a woman, Eve. Now they could enjoy all that God had made together. God told Adam and Eve that they could eat fruit from all the trees in the garden except the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Eve saw how beautiful the tree in the middle of the garden was, and its fruit looked very good to eat. The serpent lied to Eve, and so she ate the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. She gave some to Adam, and he also ate the fruit. Adam and Eve had to leave their beautiful home in the Garden of Eden because they had not been obedient. After that, they had to work hard and had many troubles. And this is the story of Adam and Eve. If you liked this story, you can download a PowerPoint version of this from the Twinkl website. Thanks for watching. The story of Noah's Ark. God saw that all the people on earth were acting badly, so He decided to send a flood that would wipe out evil. However, there was one good man on earth. His name was Noah, and God trusted him. God decided that He would save Noah by telling him that the flood was coming. He would instruct Noah to build a really big boat called an ark. After Noah had built the ark, God told him to put 2 of every animal on earth in it, both male and female. When Noah, his family, and the animals were all safely on the ark, the rain began to fall. It kept falling for 40 days and 40 nights. The waters flooded the earth. Every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out except for Noah, his family, and the animals who were safe inside the ark. When the sun came out, the waters started to dry up, and the ark came to rest on a mountain. Noah sent out a raven to find dry land, but it came straight back. A few days later, he sent out a dove. The dove returned with a leaf in its beak. When the dove was sent out again, it did not return. "The waters must have dried up completely," exclaimed Noah. So all of the animals and Noah's family left the ark. God promised that He would never again send another flood that covered the earth, and made a rainbow in the sky to remind everyone of His promise. And this is the story of Noah's Ark. If you like this story, you can download a PowerPoint version from the Twinkl website. Thanks for watching. The story of Abraham. Abraham and Sarah. Long ago, there was a man called Abram who lived in a place called Haran. He owned many different animals, including sheep and cattle. Abram was a good man who lived with his wife, called Sarai, but they had no children. One day, God visited Abram to give him a message. I want you to pack up all of your things and leave your home. He wanted him to go to a new land. He made a promise to Abram. I promise I will bless your family. Abram trusted God and moved to a new land. Abram, who was now 75, and his wife Sarai, picked up all of their belongings in the land of Hanan and moved to a new land called Canaan. One night in Canaan, after a hard day's work, God appeared to Abram again. He told him to look at the sky and count all of the stars. He explained that would be how many descendants he would have. Abram told his wife about the news. She laughed because she believed they were too old. God reminded Abram of his promise. God changed his name to Abraham, which means father of many, and his wife's name to Sarah. 3 visitors came to find Abraham and Sarah. They told them they were messengers from the Lord. The visitors told Sarah she would give birth to a child. Sarah was 90 years old. Months passed, and Sarah and Abraham did have a baby. They named him Isaac. They remembered the promise God made all of those years ago, that if they moved to a new land, he would bless their family. They thanked God for his gift of Isaac. Abraham and Isaac. Abraham was married to Sarah. They thought they were too old to have children, but God blessed them. They found out that Sarah was going to have a baby, and they were delighted. Sarah gave birth to a baby boy. They called him Isaac. Abraham taught Isaac all about God. He also made sure that Isaac knew what a special boy he was. One day, God spoke to Abraham. "Abraham," God said. "I am here," replied Abraham. "Take your son, whom you love, and take him to the place called Moriah. Sacrifice him there as an offering." Abraham was very sad, but knew he had to do what God asked. The next day, Abraham woke early and asked Isaac to chop wood for a sacrifice. They loaded up their donkey with food, water, and chopped wood. They set off on their journey and travelled for 3 days. When they reached Moriah, Abraham gave the wood to Isaac to carry. Abraham carried a small bowl holding fire and a knife. Isaac said, "Father, we have the wood and the fire, but no lamb for the sacrifice." Abraham replied, "The Lord will provide the lamb." Abraham built an altar from rocks. Then he laid the wood on the top. He told Isaac to lie on the woodpile. He was about to sacrifice Isaac when he heard an angel of God call to him, "Do not do anything to the boy. You have shown you are loyal to God." Abraham saw a ram caught in a bush, and he sacrificed the animal to God instead. Abraham and Isaac worshipped God and then set off on their journey back home. This was the story of Abraham. Thanks for watching and listening. The story of Joseph. Jacob was a Hebrew who lived in Canaan. He had 12 sons. Jacob's favourite son was Joseph. He gave him a present, which was an expensive coat of many colours. This made Joseph's brothers angry and jealous. One night, Joseph had a strange dream. He had told his brothers how they had all been in the harvest field tying up the corn, when their sheaves of corn bowed down to his. Another time Joseph dreamed that the sun and moon and 11 stars were all bowing down to him. Again he told his brothers, but it made them very angry. They guessed that the dream was about them bowing to Joseph. One day, Joseph went out to check on his brothers in the fields. When they saw Joseph, they wanted to kill him. Instead, They threw him into a deep pit. Soon after, some merchants on their way to Egypt came by. The brothers decided to sell Joseph to make them some money. They took off his coat and handed him over for 20 silver coins. The brothers dipped Joseph's coat into goat's blood and took it to their father. Jacob believed Joseph must have died and was very upset. Meanwhile, Joseph was taken to Egypt and sold as a slave to a rich man named Potiphar. He worked hard and was soon put in charge of Potiphar's house and the other slaves. Sadly, Joseph was soon in trouble again. He made Potiphar's wife angry, so she made up lies about him, and he was put in prison. While he was there, 2 men who had worked for the Pharaoh were also locked up. The baker told Joseph a strange dream he had been having. Joseph explained the dream to him, though the news was bad. The cupbearer had also been having a strange dream and told Joseph. Joseph explained the dream to him. This time the news was good. A few days later, the cupbearer was released. Joseph asked the cupbearer to remember him. A while later, the Pharaoh started to have strange dreams. No one could tell him what they meant. The cupbearer told the Pharaoh about Joseph. Joseph was sent for, and the Pharaoh told him about his dream. In one dream, 7 fat cows came out of the Nile River, followed by 7 thin cows. In the second dream, 7 fat stalks of corn were eaten by 7 thin ones. Joseph explained the dreams to the Pharaoh. He said there would be 7 good years of harvest, followed by 7 years of famine. He told the Pharaoh that they should store corn so that they would not starve. Joseph was made governor. Back in Canaan, Jacob and his sons were starving. Jacob sent 10 of his sons to Egypt to buy corn from the governor. When they got to Egypt, they did not recognize Joseph. Joseph accused them of being spies and said that he would give them grain, but they must return with their youngest brother. Simeon would have to stay in prison. They soon returned to Egypt with Benjamin, the youngest brother. Joseph welcomed them to set Simeon free. On their way home, a horseman came after them. He accused them of stealing the governor's silver cup. To their horror, it was found in Benjamin's sack of corn. They were taken back to the palace. This was all part of Joseph's plan to find out what kind of people they were now. He said Benjamin must stay behind to be his slave. Judah, the brother who sold Joseph, said, "If you keep Benjamin, my father will die of grief. Please keep me instead." When Joseph saw that his brother had changed, he hugged them. Soon after, the whole family moved to Egypt to be with Joseph. Thanks for watching and listening. The story of Moses. When Moses was born, the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt. The Pharaoh was afraid of them because he thought they might take over his country. He ordered his soldiers to kill all the baby boys at birth so they would not grow up and fight him. To save Moses, his mother made a plan. She put him in a basket and sent him adrift on the river Nile and left his fate in God's will. Moses floated down the river where the Pharaoh's daughter found and rescued him. She brought him back to the palace and raised him as a son. Moses grew up in the palace as a royal prince. One day he lost his temper and killed an Egyptian who had beaten an enslaved Israelite to death. He had to flee to another land called Midian. Moses lived in the land of Midian and worked as a shepherd for 40 years. One day in the desert, he heard the voice of God from a burning bush. God asked Moses to lead his people out of enslavement in Egypt to the promised land. His brother Aaron promised to help him. Moses and Aaron went back to Egypt and asked the Pharaoh to free his people. The Pharaoh did not want to lose his enslaved Israelites, so he refused. God was angry and unleashed 10 plagues on the Egyptians. It was the 10th plague that finally made the Pharaoh let them go. The eldest son in every family, including the Pharaoh's, died. The Israelites marked their doorposts with lamb's blood so that they would be safe. God could pass over their houses and spare them. This is why the celebration is called Passover. The Israelites fled, but soon after the Pharaoh changed his mind and sent his army after them. The army chased the Israelites to the banks of the Red Sea, where they were trapped. God told Moses to lift up his rod, and as he did so the waters parted to make a dry path. When all the Israelites were safe at the other shore, Moses raised up his rod again, and the water closed on the Pharaoh's army who had been chasing them. God had saved the Israelites once more. The Israelites were free, but they still had nowhere to live. They were searching for a land called Canaan, which they had been promised by God. The journey was long and they were hungry. Moses promised that God would provide food. To their amazement, the next day they woke up to discover that the ground was covered with white food that tasted like honey. When their water ran out, God told Moses to strike a rock with his rod. As he did this, water ran out and they were all able to drink. After 3 months of travelling, the Israelites arrived at the foot of Mount Sinai, where God called Moses to meet him at the top of the mountain. Moses had to climb the mountain in a thunderstorm. At the top of the mountain, God gave Moses 10 important laws. These laws were called the 10 Commandments and would tell the people how to live. Moses promised God that the Israelites would keep to all the 10 Commandments. This is where the 10 Commandments come from. And this is the story of Moses. If you liked this story, you can download a PowerPoint version on the Twinkl website. Thanks for watching. The story of David and Goliath. David was a shepherd boy. He protected his sheep from wolves. King Saul was the king of Israel. The Israelites and the Philistines were enemies. The two armies were ordered to prepare for battle. The Philistines had a huge army. They also had a huge man in their army. His name was Goliath. Goliath was 9 feet tall. That's taller than your classroom door. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore bronze armour over his body. He had a javelin slung across his back and held a tall spear in his hand. Every day for 40 days, Goliath would shout to the Israelites, "Choose a man to fight me. If I win, you will be our slaves. If you win, we will be your slaves." So David left his sheep with another shepherd and went to see his brothers. David's brothers were in the Israelite army. David was sent to his brothers to give them some food. While he was with his brothers, David saw the giant Goliath and heard what he was shouting. David said to King Saul, "I will fight the giant. I protect my sheep from wolves, so I can fight this man. God will keep me safe." Saul agreed and said to David, "Go, and the Lord will be with you." Saul put armour on David and a bronze helmet, but it was too heavy and David couldn't move. David took it all off again. David chose 5 smooth stones from the river and put them in his shepherd's bag. He held his sling, like a catapult, in his hand. When Goliath saw the boy coming towards him, he laughed out loud and shouted, "Come here, and I will feed you to the birds." David replied, "You come at me with a spear, but I have the Lord on my side." He put a stone into the sling, swung it around his head, and let the stone go. The stone hit Goliath on the forehead, and he fell down, dead. The Israelites cheered. David the shepherd boy was a hero, and with God on his side, had saved them from slavery. And this is the story of David and Goliath. If you like this story, you can download a PowerPoint version from the Twinkl website. Thanks for watching. The Conversion of Saul. Saul was an angry man who hated Christians. He used to treat them badly and try to hurt them. Saul heard there were Christians telling people about their faith in a synagogue in Damascus, so he travelled there to harm them. He had lots of horrible plans in store for them. As his journey was nearly at an end, a bright light shone all around him. A voice said to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" "Who are you, Lord?" asked Saul. "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting," the voice replied. "It is hard for you to fight against me. Go now into Damascus, and you will be told what you must do." After this meeting with Jesus, Saul was led by the hand into Damascus, for he had been made blind for 3 days and could not eat or drink anything. Jesus spoke to a disciple called Ananias in a dream and told him to go and see Saul. Ananias was afraid to visit Saul, for he knew how cruel he was. But Jesus told him what big plans he had for Saul. So Ananias visited Saul and laid his hands on him. At that moment, Saul was healed by God and able to see again. Full of joy, he was baptized in the river as a follower of Jesus. Sorry for all the bad things he'd done to his new friends, Saul changed his name to Paul and spent the rest of his life travelling the world, telling everyone he met about the greatness of God and teaching them about Jesus. This was the story of Saul. Thanks for watching and listening. The story of Elijah. People thought Elijah was a good man. He was a prophet, which means people believed he listened to God and passed his special messages to others. King Ahab was married to Queen Jezebel. They were not good rulers. King Ahab did not look after his people, and he did not love God. Ahab, Jezebel, and their people worshipped a stone statue that they called Baal. Elijah had a message from God for King Ahab, so he went to see him. "You must love God," he said. "If you do not, there will be no rain, and your people will go hungry." King Ahab did not listen to Elijah. He carried on worshipping Baal and thinking of no one but himself. The rain stopped. There was no rain for weeks, and people began to get worried. People went to see King Ahab. "You must help us," they said. "We are hungry and thirsty. If it doesn't rain soon, we will die." King Ahab was furious. "Send Elijah at once," he demanded. "This is his fault." When Elijah saw King Ahab, he had another message for him. "I'll prove that your God is not a real God," said Elijah. He spoke to the crowd that had gathered. "You cannot have two gods. We must prove which is real. Build 2 fires, one for Baal and one for God." 2 fires were built. Both were piles of stone with wood and meat on top. "The real God is the one who can light the fire and cook the meat," declared Elijah. Baal's people asked Baal to light the fire. Nothing happened. They danced and shouted, but still nothing happened. "My turn now," said Elijah. He poured water on top of his pile of wood. "That will never light now," the people said. Elijah began to talk to God. He didn't shout or dance or sing. He just talked. Just then, the fire began to burn. It burned well and cooked the meat. The people were amazed. "This is the real God," they cried. Just then, the rain began to pour. The drought was over at last. Everyone realized that Elijah had been right all along. That was the story of Elijah. Thanks for watching and listening. Daniel and the Lion's Den. Darius became king of Babylon. He appointed governors to help rule over his kingdom. He put Daniel in charge of the governors. Daniel was very hard-working and was better at his job than anyone else. He prayed to his God every day. The king was so impressed with Daniel that he decided to put him in charge of the whole kingdom. The governors were jealous of Daniel and tried to find fault with him, but they found nothing wrong. So the governors came up with a devious plan. The governors knew that nothing would stop Daniel from praying to his God, so they came up with a new law. This was the new law. From this day forth, no man, woman or child is to pray to any god or man except Darius, the great king. If anyone disobeys this law, they will be thrown into the den of lions. This is by order of King Darius. Daniel heard the king's decree, but the next day he still went to the window to pray to his God. The governors watched him. The governors told the king, and the king had no choice but to have Daniel arrested. Daniel was thrown into the lion's den. The next morning, the king and the governors went to the den. The king called to Daniel, hoping for a reply. To the king's joy, Daniel replied. He was alive. His God had protected him from the lions. Daniel was brought out of the pit. The king realized he had been tricked by the governors, so he threw them into the den. They were all eaten. King Darius issued a new decree. From this day forth, every man, woman and child is to pray to the God that Daniel serves. He is the only living God, and his kingdom will never end. He saved Daniel. This is by order of King Darius. I hope you enjoyed this Bible story. Thanks for watching and listening. The Story of Esther. There was a time when Jewish people lived in a country called Persia that was ruled by King Xerxes. The king had a beautiful queen named Vashti, who he wished to show off to all the men in his court. Vashti refused to be shown off by the king. Full of fury at being disobeyed, he decided to find a new queen to replace her. Esther was a young and very beautiful Jewish girl who had been raised by her cousin Mordecai. The king decided that Esther, out of all the women in his kingdom, should be his new queen. Mordecai instructed her to not reveal she was Jewish. Sitting at the king's gate one day, Mordecai overheard two palace officers plotting to kill King Xerxes. He sent a warning to King Xerxes and saved his life. Because of this, Mordecai's name was written in the royal record book. Mordecai had an enemy close to the king, named Haman. Haman disliked Mordecai because he refused to bow to him whenever Haman passed by. Mordecai would only bow to God. Haman was so angry with Mordecai. He tricked the king into passing a law. On a certain date, Mordecai and all the other Jewish people in Persia would be put to death. Mordecai found out about Haman's evil intentions and asked Esther to go to the king to stop the plan. Esther was afraid. No one could see him without being invited, so she fasted and prayed for 3 days to build up her courage to see the king. Esther asked the Jewish people to fast and pray with her too. It was very dangerous for Esther to approach the king without his permission, but Mordecai told her she had been put close to the king by God, especially to save the Jewish people. Esther came up with a plan and invited the king and Haman to a banquet the next day. Haman was impatient to have Mordecai killed before all the other Jews, so he set up a gallows and planned to ask the king the next day to have Mordecai hanged there. That night, the king could not sleep and asked to hear the royal record book read aloud. He realized that Mordecai had never been rewarded for saving his life. The next day, the king asked Haman, "What should be done for a man the king delights to honour?" Haman, thinking the king was talking about himself, painted a rich picture of all the honours that should be given to him. Pleased with Haman's suggestions, the king ordered him to go and arrange all of these honours for Mordecai. Mordecai was given the king's horse and robe, and Haman was forced to lead him through the streets for all to see. Haman was humiliated. Later that day, Haman and the king went to Esther's banquet. The king was so pleased with her that he openly agreed to grant any request she made. Esther then told the king about Haman's plot to kill her people and asked him to save them. "Hang Haman!" the king called in fury. And so Haman was defeated, and the king passed a new law that saved the Jewish people from their fate. Mordecai took Haman's place as the king's favourite. God did all this through the beautiful Queen Esther. This was the story of Esther. Thanks for watching. Jonah and the Big Fish, also known as Jonah and the Whale. God said to Jonah, "Go to Nineveh." Jonah pretended not to hear God. Jonah ran away from God because he didn't want to do what God was asking. He knew that the people of Nineveh were bad. Jonah ran to the sea and got on a boat that was going away from Nineveh. Jonah fell sound asleep on the boat, and God sent a storm. The other people on the boat were scared and worried. They knew that God was mad. They woke Jonah up and threw him into the sea. Jonah was swallowed up by a huge fish. While Jonah was inside the fish, he said sorry to God, and the fish spat Jonah out. Jonah praised God and listened to him. Once again, God said to Jonah, "Go to Nineveh." This time, Jonah went, and the people of Nineveh listened to him. They also said sorry to God. And this is the story of Jonah and the Big Fish. If you liked this story, you can download a PowerPoint version of this for free from the Twinkl website. Thanks for watching. We hope you've enjoyed all of our Old Testament Bible stories. Make sure to check out some of our other videos on the Twinkl YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.